Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So the big snow that we had was followed by a little bit of a warm-up and then an ice storm and then a day of rain. And as you can see, it's pretty much all melted now. We finally don't have to haul buckets of water down to Sophie and Amos. Everything is thawed out enough that we could dump out the ice and grab the water hose and fill it up the easy way. So in my last video, I believe I had mentioned canning up some more of that smoked turkey. And of course, once I removed all of the meat from the turkey carcass, I went ahead and I made another batch of the turkey stock with the smoked turkey bones. The smoky flavor for the stock is very subtle, so it's not overpowering, and I could really use this for any soup or recipe. And I had shown how when I was canning up the turkey, how I had a feeling I had over-tightened one of the lids, and sure enough, that jar lid had buckled under pressure. You know, sometimes you should really just trust your gut and not second guess yourself when you're doing the canning like that. And here's another example. When I wipe down my jars with the vinegar cloth, I pay attention to the rims and feel for any flaws. And I really just was not sure about this jar. It didn't quite feel right to me. But I second guessed myself and I went ahead and used it anyways instead of putting the stock into a different jar. Now as you can see, I was filtering all of this turkey stock through some cheesecloth. This is a very fine cheesecloth that Heather at Needy Homesteader had shared in some of her canning videos. I went ahead and ordered some and it worked really well. Now my stock or broth is not anywhere as crystal clear as Heather's is, as she is very careful not to stir up any of the sediments when she's pulling the stock or broth out. However, I just went ahead and used every last drop in the pot, so it's not going to be quite as clear, but that fine cheesecloth really helps out. Now I do chill my broth or stocks to remove the excess fat from the top before I bring them up to a boil and can. Not everybody does that step, and that's okay because we all have different preferences when it comes to canning, and no two canners are alike. While the turkey stock was processing in the pressure canner, I went ahead and started dinner. I was making a really chunky beef chili that I make. It's a paleo-friendly recipe in that there's no legumes or anything like that in there. It does use a little bit of diced carrots. If you omitted the carrots, it would also be a keto-friendly recipe. But I was making this chili because I'm working on another recipe. As most of you know, I am a food writer and I was a food blogger for many years before I ever picked up a camera to start doing YouTube videos. And part of that process is developing recipes, and sometimes there's trial and error. And I've been working on a cornbread dumpling recipe. And that is why I decided to make that hearty beef chili, because what goes better with chili than cornbread? While I was mixing up the batter for the cornbread dumplings, the timer went off for the jars to come out of the canner, which had already been done processing. Mr. Smith jumped in to pull the jars out of the canner. So earlier in the process, when I had been venting the steam and letting the inside of the pressure canner come up to temperature, my timer went off and it was time to put the weight on. But when I went to pick it up and put it on the canner, Mr. Smith snatched it up and said, "Let me do it." I think he's kind of fascinated with the process of canning. He always seems to hang around a bit when he's not busy with his work and there's canning taking place in the kitchen. So here you can see me scooping the cornbread dumplings onto the simmering soup or the simmering chili. And I'm putting the lid on and I'm just going to let them cook. This burgundy Dutch oven that you see me using here was another one of my TJ Maxx finds recently. All right, the turkey stock is looking great. So I ended up with 6 quarts of turkey stock plus 1 pint. And that'll sit there and cool until the next day. The cornbread dumplings are done, and now it is time to give it a taste. To be honest, I wasn't too impressed, and so the cornbread dumpling recipe will not be going on my website quite yet. It's going to take a few more trials before I get it right, and when I do, that's when it'll get published. In my last video, you saw me wearing this thing that looks like a skirt, but actually it's considered a wearable blanket. Great for when the weather is super, super cold. I had something similar to it when I lived in Alaska, and I was kicking myself for getting rid of it. I had kept my winter boots and my boot snow chains, but I didn't keep that winter skirt. And so I had actually ordered this one. It's made out of wool and it's a little bit lighter weight. And I went ahead and I ordered one similar to the one that I had in Alaska. And it has since come in the mail, but it's warmed up to the 60s now. And so I don't quite need it yet. But I decided I'm gonna go ahead and make a couple more of the lightweight ones out of some fleece fabric so that when it does turn cold, I can wear the fleece ones for working outside and not my good wool one. Now you may remember that last year I had a little bit of an accident with my Bible cover accidentally catching on fire. And so I decided it was time to finally sew a new cover for my Bible. And I made it out of this beautiful red floral tapestry fabric. I had a scrap of this left from something else that I had made a long time ago, and I just couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. I thought, I'll use this for something. Well, when I was going through my fabrics to pick something out for this Bible cover, I thought that is the perfect fabric. I have a tutorial on how to make these custom Bible covers on my website as well as here on YouTube. I'll put a link to those in the video description down below. So the next morning came time to check the seals on all of my turkey stock. I remove the rings, I lift the jars up by the lid to make sure they're truly sealed. And this is that jar that I was questioning myself about. I should have listened to my gut. Now, if this was something like a jelly or jam, I would have just stuck it in the refrigerator to use right away. However, this being a turkey stock and it having sat out all night at room temperature, it was getting dumped down the drain. But every other jar sealed perfectly, as they usually do. Now, back when I first started canning many years ago, I did not know that you were supposed to wash your jars after you process them and before you put them in the pantry. But it didn't take long for me to realize that those lids weren't always pristine when they come out of the canner. And so I always wash the jars down with some warm soapy water. And I go ahead and I wash all the rings that I had used in the batch that I canned. And then I dry them off and I put them in my basket to be used again. I never used to share this process in my canning videos, but I thought it might be good to show this once in a while. Now here's that jar. It ended up being a defective edge. It was not perfectly smooth, and I don't want to keep this jar for anything because I don't want it to end up back in my canning rotation. So it went straight into the trash. And finally, I'll dry off the jars, label them, and put them in the pantry. January is a great time to be working on canning projects, and thus why the Needy Homesteader created Jar It Up January. The weather is cold, but canning in the kitchen is nice and warm, and it gives you time to work on all of these things to fill up the pantry while life is a little bit slower. In the very near future, I'm going to be doing a question and answer video. So if you have something that you have been dying to ask me, leave it in the comments down below, and it may be one of the questions that I select to answer in that video. And with that, I'm just going to leave you with one of my favorite parts of our homestead, when the creek is flowing and the water is falling. Thanks for joining me here at the homestead. Lord willing, I'll talk to y'all next time.